Hubris, the fall of General Edward Braddock. In the midst of the American wilderness, a conflict brewed that would reshape the continent. It was to be called the French and Indian War, a struggle for control over the Ohio Valley that pitted British forces against the French and their Native American allies. At the center of this struggle was one man, General Edward Braddock. Born in 1695 in London, England, Edward Braddock was a seasoned soldier who had served in the War of the Austrian Succession. He quickly rose through the ranks, known for his discipline and strategic acumen. In 1755, he was appointed to command British forces in the colonies, tasked with a crucial mission to capture Fort Duquesne, a French stronghold guarding their interests at the confluence of the Ohio River, now known as Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Braddock assembled a force of nearly 1,500 troops, including British regulars, colonial militia, and Native American allies. As they marched through the dense forests of Virginia, Maryland, and Pennsylvania, Braddock's confidence was unshaken. He believed in the superiority of the tried and tested English military tactics he had drilled into his men to overcome any problems with the unfamiliar terrain. In order to make the march from his headquarters at Alexandria in the Virginia colony, Braddock ordered his men to build military roads through the wilderness, stretches of which still exist to this very day, and at one point made up the first national highway in the United States. This area and road were very familiar to Braddock's aide, George Washington. He had surveyed and laid out much of the route and had used it during his ill-fated diplomatic mission to parley with the French at Great Meadow, an incident which in many ways led to the war, because after surrendering his position at Fort Necessity, Washington signed what he thought was a pardon. Washington didn't read French, and he had unwittingly signed a murder confession for the death of the French emissary at the hands of an Indian scout under his command. Which brings us to July 9, 1755. After months of preparation and marching, Braddock's forces finally were approaching Fort Duquesne, which stood just across the Monongahela River from their location. Declining to have scouts ride ahead, Braddock did not anticipate the combined force of French troops and Native American warriors who lay in wait, having anticipated their arrival for weeks. As Braddock's men emerged from the woods, marching in lockstep formation, they were met with a fierce ambush by French and Indians, firing from behind trees and fences. The well-trained British forces, unaccustomed to guerrilla warfare, faltered. Braddock's insistence on maintaining traditional formations made them easy targets and led to high casualties. During the chaos, Braddock was struck by a bullet and fell mortally wounded. Under fire, and with most of the British officers rendered unable to command, George Washington took command and organized an orderly retreat from the field. Braddock, though gravely injured, displayed remarkable resilience. As he was transported away from the battlefield, he uttered prophetic words, lamenting the loss of his men and the failure of his mission. On July 13, 1755, just days after the ambush, General Edward Braddock succumbed to his wounds. He was 60 years old. Braddock was buried in a grave on the path he had taken, his body interred in the wilderness he had sought to conquer. In order to protect his remains and to disguise his grave, his soldiers rode over it, forever linking his spirit to the land. Braddock's body laid undisturbed until the early 1800s, when a road crew discovered it. As was the fashion in those days, his body was desecrated and parts were taken for morbid souvenirs. It is rumored that a finger was on display at P.T. Barnum's museum in New York when it burned down, and that the U.S. Army Medical Center at Walter Reed has a piece of his spine in their bone collection. The rest of his body was moved and reinterred at a more suitable location, on a hill overlooking the road. General Braddock's campaign and his tragic demise served as a stark lesson for the British military. It underscored the need for new strategies in the face of unconventional warfare. His legacy would pave the way for future military leaders, including George Washington, who would learn from Braddock's mistakes. The story of General Edward Braddock is one of hubris and arrogance in the face of a changing reality. He was among the most experienced and well-trained soldiers on Earth, the commander of one of the most powerful armies on the planet, and yet he was routed by a handful of men who used terrain and cover. Thanks for watching Hometown History. Like and subscribe.